Ask Andrew show, Canada's first Facebook live streaming family law question and answer show. My name is Andrew Feldstein, and I'm the principal of Feldstein Family Law Group. We have offices in Markham, Vaughan, Mississauga, and Oakville. Both myself and our entire firm of 10 lawyers practices exclusively in the area of family law in the province of Ontario. Today, we'll be discussing the mental and emotional health impact that inevitably follows in the event of separation or divorce. We have a psychotherapist, Tamika Schilbe Cole, joining us on the show today. Tamika's specialty includes helping clients who are going through separation and or divorce. Welcome to the show, Tamika.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start by asking if you can tell us a little bit about the important work that you do.
So, in terms of separation and divorce, I work with folks on the entire continuum or journey, I guess you could say, of separating. So, people that are contemplating separating, to people that are going through the emotional or even the physical moving, separating, all the way to people that are rebuilding their lives. And so, I do work with folks that are struggling with the emotional impacts of separation and divorce or trying to reorganize their lives. Also the social impacts, because our social lives often change after separation and divorce. And helping people through this is important because it's one of the biggest stressors on the stressor index. It's even bigger than death. Most people don't realize this because when someone dies, there aren't always all these other things that go with that. With separation and divorce, there could be a move, there could be financial stress, there could be suddenly single parenting, litigation potentially, and you know how that can cause stress. So all of those things make it pretty incredible to be able to be a witness to people as they're going through that really big transition in their lives. And I would say kind of what makes my work not unique, because I think lots of people do this, but what I specialize in or what I focus on is really helping people make meaning of something that's very difficult and help them understand that the grieving that they're going through is actually, in a way, a new beginning. So obviously when things are really tough, you don't feel that way. You don't feel like everything is light and great, but helping people move toward that space where they can see that this is almost like a new life for them. You hear people all the time saying, that was in my other life, and so like pre-divorce. And so helping people through that is really important.
Well, I want to start with I take a few things from that. It sounds like a lot of your clientele come to you at the start of the process, or do they come to you at any time during the divorce separation process?
They can come in at any time during the process. Some people come and, they're actually just feeling like there's something off in their life. And then when we get exploring what's going on, we realize that, or they identify that there are actually some troublesome things and unhealthy things in their relationship, and they might work on those and work on those with the other person, or they might move towards separation or divorce. So I work with people, though, that have been dealing with betrayal, maybe some kind of emotional or other types of abuse that they've been dealing with, but also just folks that are like, how do I do this? How do I live this way when my whole identity has been wrapped up in my life with the family as I knew it?
Well, I found it very interesting what you said, because you talked about it helping people make meaningful decisions while they're grieving. Not only have I been a divorce lawyer for 28 years, but 9 years ago I had I guess I had to live through it myself, and it gives you a very different perspective. And when I heard those words, they really brought meaning to me, because I remember feeling the need to reach out to somebody like you in your profession to just try and sort out where my thoughts are, what went wrong, trying to figure out what the mistakes were. I think for a lot of people, it's not just who was right, who was wrong. It's why did you end up where you did? How can you make sure that you don't end up making that same mistake another time in your life? What was wrong in the way you behaved? What was wrong in the person you selected? Maybe you just weren't a good fit. There's all sorts of things that work their way into that. And that's why when I hear you talk about new beginnings, how do you work with people to foster that? Because I know a lot of clients, when they come in, they say divorce is like mourning the loss of a loved one. And part of the mourning process is being able to then move on to your next stage of life. But it does take time to mourn and be ready to start to move on.
It absolutely does. And well said, Andrew. I have been through this myself as well, and it is not an easy road. And so when I speak about making meaning, I think it depends on where the person is at in the stage of what they're going through. So if they've just found out some information that has devastated them, they are going to be in a crisis state for a little while. And it's how can they make that crisis state the least anxiety producing? How can we reduce fear? How can we make decisions so we're not, doing things we're going to regret later, either in the couple, in the partnership, or with the kids? So it's helping people through that piece. And I think the meaning comes in as in always taking the person back to your life isn't over, your new life is going to begin soon. And some of it is that, but we work on the thought processes that people have around what's happened. And sometimes it's their choice, so they're very excited about the future too, and the new life that they're gonna move into. But then they need to focus a little bit backwards and focus on, perhaps spending regular contact with the kids and making sure that stays stable. So there's a lot of different scenarios that can come up.
So I took down some notes on what you said, and I see new life begins soon. And for people who are going through the process, it really is a new life. I remember when it happened to me, and I'm 44 years old. I separated after 14 years, and all of a sudden you find yourself single again. And you're surprised to see you're going out on Saturday nights again, whether it's friends or on a date, and you feel in a way like, how am I doing things now like I did when I was in my 20s as part of that whole new life? And dating again and thinking these are things I didn't think I was going to experience. I think for a lot of people, they find that to be very unsettling.
Yeah, it can be so difficult because our identities are wrapped up in our families, as they should be to some extent. And I think that this is a time of life where people just are almost spinning. They don't know who they are anymore, what direction they're going, and what their life is going to look like. So it brings up a lot of fear. But it is a new beginning. And I think in the old way of thinking of grief, it's heavy, and of course it is heavy. I'm not saying grieving isn't heavy, and it is, but it's also, things are faster now than they were in the 80s. Like, I don't know if you notice this, but things move quicker. And so I think people can heal faster than they think. I was just talking to a woman the other day who said, my friends say that it's going to take me 10 years. And I said, well, it might have taken them 10 years, but it doesn't have to take you 10 years to heal from this.
I know one of the things I see clients come in, and there's usually a difference. I find a lot of times you have one client, they've made the decision to separate, and they're not mourning because they've already mourned the loss of that relationship leading up to the decision to separate. And then you have the person who was just told it's fresh and is dealing with a whole bunch of issues they don't want to deal with. And and you find they're usually the person who says, I don't understand. I want my spouse back. I want my old life back. And I remember when I came to the realization in my own relationship that when you're thinking about what you may have wanted back, it really didn't exist. It's that you may be thinking about the person you married, not the person you were just with. You may have thought your life was one thing when it wasn't that. And a big part, I know I'm not a therapist, but I talk to my clients because they talk to me, and sometimes I have to get them to see it to help them move on, is we direct them to see people like you, but I also say to them frequently, you have to realize that what you're mourning is something that just doesn't exist. And I've had many clients say to me, and they think about it, and they call me up afterwards, they say, Andrew, you were right. That was what I needed to go to the next stage. And I don't know if you see something similar to that for people.
Absolutely. It's people do have to almost do a post-mortem on what the relationship was about but often you can't see it until you're out of it. And then some people also go back and then they realize it isn't what they thought because of all the things that have happened in the separating. And if they reconcile, they even go back and realize it wasn't what the relationship that they originally went into. So I think that you're absolutely right that it can be so confusing in that way, but also that they do have to look forward. And this is hard for people to do though, and I'm sure you find this, Andrew. Looking forward at what's coming next is really tough when you're still holding on to, for some people, still holding on to what was. So it's a balance, and every single person is going to handle this differently because of depending on the circumstances, as you know, right? If that was their
Well,
choice.
and I think it's critical to say looking forward. I think of how many of my clients have been in my office and they're sad and they're depressed and they're struggling. And sometimes people really need to have that reinforcement of all the positives they have. So when I have
Yeah.
somebody in my office who's in their 30s or 40s or leaving the relationship with wonderful kids and they have a good relationship and financially they're in a good position, I try to remind them. And again, I'm not a therapist, but I try to say you have all these positives in your life. And I see lots of people who don't have that. And
Yeah.
you're young enough, one of the things you said about is a new beginning. And it's very different, I think, when you're in your 30s, 40s, maybe even early 50s, when you start a new beginning, than in the gray divorce where somebody's in their late 60s or early 70s. I say to people, you have lots of time. Go enjoy life. Make that new beginning. Make the best of it. Now, I don't know if you're doing similar things like that in your work. I'm not a therapist, and I keep on saying that because you obviously know better than I do, but is that the kind of thing that you're seeing with your clients?
Absolutely. And it is different in what I call chapter 3 or chapter 4, even when you're in your older years and you're separating and divorcing, because you have a different goals and different expectations perhaps, and focusing on what you want to create at any age is so important. What do you want to do? What do you want to create with your life? What kind of if you do want a new relationship, and it is possible at any age, um, if you do want it, what do you want it to look like, and what are the pieces of it that you really want to call into your life? And I think that's a good conversation to have with people. And um, it's I think in therapy, because you're working with so many people, so you don't have to be a therapist to have the experience with separation and divorce that you do. But I think when I'm working with people, it's little thoughts that they have that actually aren't that little, that are belief systems that, I'll never meet somebody again, I'm never going to be happy again. There's belief systems that actually we have to chip away at some of those and really challenge them, because if they're going to create something new, they've got to be open to the possibility.
Well, I frequently will have people say to me, Andrew, especially after going through the process with divorce lawyers, I'm never going to marry, I'm never going to live with anybody again. And then I say to them, I went through this at 44 years old. And I remember I was at a conference and I'm at a table with 10 divorce lawyers. I think some of them have turned into judges since then. And they all bet me that within 3 years I'd be living with somebody. And I said, it will never happen again. It's not going to happen. I'm never going through it again. And it's a good thing we didn't put money on that bet because I lost. I'm with a wonderful lady now. I'm thrilled with that. But by the same token, it I sometimes will illustrate that to people to say, you might be feeling one thing right now because of all the hostility, all the conflict, but don't close yourself off to things that may happen in your future because why should you? And you got to realize that when you're fresh in the throes of this, you're not necessarily thinking clearly as well. And I don't know if you see clients and how well they're thinking and can they appreciate that their judgment may be clouded at that time.
Well, we definitely talk about that, and people often come into counseling saying, when is this going to be over? When are these feelings going to be over? And that's a normal thing to think and feel because you just want it to be done. But I think that people are able to get through it in different, depending on how much support they have, depending on their social support system, their professional support system, and how good the relationships are, they are able to move in different speeds depending on those factors. So it is definitely a challenging time, and I don't underestimate when I'm talking about making meaning and that it's going to be a new beginning. I don't underestimate that crisis period, because what's also happening at that stage is that people's self-worth can be pummeled. Really, they have lost that sense of like, who am I? And when you don't know who you are, it's hard to imagine a wonderful future. So, but you always have to remember, and I think people always have to remember that there is something more. This is something that's happening to you for some reason. I don't know what it is exactly, but we figure it out together in that meaning making work that we do. We figure out, okay, what are some of the things that are benefits to me in going through this difficult time?
Well, it's interesting you say benefits because for some people, I see they're happy with the opportunity to shed their former spouse. That's usually the person who made the decision to leave. The other person is frequently depressed about the lack of time with kids and the lack of financial resources, and they really struggle with that. And I usually find that I'm curious here if you see it the same way, but if it was an equal balanced relationships in terms of who earned the money, I don't get this as much, but when one side earned the bulk of the money, they really feel like they're being cut in half. And they struggle a lot more at the concept of the support they're going to have to pay, the property division they're going to have to pay. And they don't see that sense of fairness, that sense of equity when they're being told the marriage is over, give me half the money, which they view as their money, and give me a whole whack of support, which they view as their money. How do you deal with those kind of feelings or emotions? Because that's something I see all the time. And my only way of dealing with it is saying to people, well, that's the law.
Yeah. And it is the law for a reason, isn't it? It's a law because it's the fair thing. And it is hard for people to get over. That would, in some of those cases, I'd be dealing with anger management. And how are they, helping them manage the anger and bitterness that they're feeling and the frustration that they're feeling, which are all very different emotions. They often go together in a little bundle, but I would be helping someone through that because it's kind of like what they say about having so much rage towards someone else or resentment towards someone else. It's like drinking poison and thinking the other person is going to be harmed, you know so you don't want to continue that for your own physical health or your mental well-being either. You don't want to continue on that path. It's not going to be good for anyone in the situation. It's definitely not going to be good for that person. So I would help them with that. I mean, they also have to emote it first, though. You can't just say, "Oh, here's strategy." For as a therapist, I can't just say, "Here's the strategies to get over anger," because anger is a valid feeling. It's also sometimes anger is a normal reaction to being sort of feeling like someone's threatening you in some way. So it's just not somewhere you want to stay.
Well, and I'll give you the other one there. In that same kind of relationship, you have the other parent who spent most of the time with the kids, the other parent who was the primary caregiver. And now, more times than not, parenting ends up equal time. And that person who did spend a lot of time with the kids is now struggling. It's not fair. Why do the kids have to spend that much time with the other parent? Why do they get the same say as me with respect to the children? And they struggle with that. And then when I say, well, we could fight about parenting time if you want, but at the end of the day, what we're typically fighting about is, and I'll say it in a very generic way, equal time for most people is a schedule where one parent gets Monday, Tuesday, the other one Wednesday, Thursday, and they alternate weekends. And if you're going to have a primary caregiver, it usually means a difference of one night per week. And I say to them, odds are, unless there's a good reason, it's going to be joint decision making. If you live in close proximity and there's no work related issues, a good chance it's going to be equal time. And we could go to war and spend a whole whack of your money fighting about one night after school every week. And the person who hears that, they really struggle sometimes at hearing that. And they'll give me, but I did this, I did that. And how do you struggle with that person when they come in? I know I'm giving generics and there's different types, but those are two kinds of personalities that we see a lot of.
Yeah, and I think it's really honoring that person because it may not be the case, but it may be true that they did do most of the stuff. And so now they have to give over control to someone else. And that's very scary when you've been in control and been the leader in that child rearing situation. I don't mean that the other partner isn't involved, but you maybe have taken on the bulk of the work in in that sort of nurturing way. And I do work with lots of folks that are in that situation that you're talking about, and it's a letting go process. It is not easy to let go of that's part of your identity, you know, whether it's a mother or a father, it's part of who you are and the fabric of who you are. And so I think it's honoring what they have done and acknowledging what they have done, because sometimes in those proceedings and in that high conflict, no one's doing that. Maybe there's family members that are getting involved and saying, you deserve this and you do that. Sometimes that can make it worse. But they themselves aren't maybe feeling good about this decision. So to honor them is a huge part of recovering. But it doesn't change the outcome. Like you said, a lot of times it doesn't change the outcome of the actual custody arrangement.
And I mean, there's value to the status quo, but practically speaking, we see in more and more cases it ends up equal time. And one of the things that I'm seeing as becoming a problem in some cases is the cell phone. The cell phone can create a nightmare for parents. And what I mean by this, and I am interested in hearing your thoughts, is you have one parent who believes in tracking wherever the child goes, and the other parent doesn't want the child tracked, and certainly not tracked on their parenting time. You have children sometimes will record conversations they're having with the parents, or secretly phone the other parent, or report to the other parent on the cell phone. How do you deal with those kind of things? Because on one hand, a cell phone is a great thing. On the other hand, it can be a poison into somebody else's home.
Yeah, and when we're at the stage of recording one parent and then giving it to the other parent, like if a child's doing that, we're in a pretty, I would want to see that child with the person. I don't actually do couples counseling. That's not a specialty of mine. So if someone wants that, they should definitely go to a couples counselor. But I do family counseling. And I would try to help that young person and that parent around the ethics of recording someone and then sharing it back. I mean, most kids don't want to be in the middle of this. It's not what they want. It's just so stressful to be in the middle. And so they feel physically pulled apart. I always say to people, can you imagine someone taking your limbs and physically pulling you apart? Because you are as a kid, you're part of that person and that person too. You are fully both. So I think the conflict is bad if they're recording people. And I'm not a fan of a lot of technology like that, because I think there's other issues that can go with it. But yeah.
Well, the conflict is obviously always bad, and it's a horrible thing to put the children in the middle. But I've had clients who will take the children on vacation, and they say after the vacation, I might as well have brought my ex with me, because they were on, FaceTime with their children so often that it wasn't my vacation.
Yeah. So
And,
you mean they were on with the ex? Is that what you mean? They were on with the ex
constantly throughout the vacation. How does somebody deal with that? Because
Well,
I'm assuming some people come to you and say, how was your vacation and Christmas break with your kids? Well, it would have been better, but they had to report in to the other parent 3 times a day, and they were having 30-minute discussions, and the child's walking around on FaceTime showing the pool and and reporting on every meal and everything that's going on. I don't know if that's something you see very often.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that kid is bonded with that parent to the level of they want to show them their daily life. And so I think I would say to the person that's on the vacation, to the vacationing parent, I think I would say, can you allow that? Depending on the age, you might be able to curb some of it, but if they're getting into preteen and teens, you're not going to be able to control that bond that they have with their other parent. And so you resisting it can almost make it bigger, the bond, because you're resisting something that's really natural to that child. So, and again, I'm giving this as a generality, but I'd really want to know more specifics in the situation and have more details, because every situation is a little unique. But fighting what is never really works.
No, but I think I frequently hear from people these kinds of challenges that you have. I remember one client saying to me, Their child admitted while on vacation that they told the other parent they were not going to have a good time, and that they intentionally packed clothes that were too small to get that other parent to buy them new clothes. And that was all done with one parent to the other parent. And you sit
Yeah.
there and you say, these are things lawyers can't fix. It's more about what strategies does a parent do when facing the situation, and B, to try and stop the situation in the future to preempt it. And I don't know if
Yeah.
these are the kinds of things that you see or not.
Absolutely. And I mean, I see all kinds of different things. And I'm not laughing to make fun of anyone's situation, but it is a time limited thing that you're in. If you're going through this, it is not going to be forever. I have to say that first off. And working on yourself and how you're responding to these frustrating situations is key. It's really everything. And because I think one of the biggest things I see in my practice is people wanting to change or influence their ex. That's probably one of the biggest issues I deal with. And you can't actually do that. You can't anymore. You may have been able to do that when you were together, but you probably can't anymore. And so people really have to understand the power that they actually have. They have a lot of power to change the dynamic by just changing how they respond. Like if two people are going like this at each other and it's like back and forth and fighting, 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 if one person lets go, the other person has nowhere to go. There's no fight left. So, and I'm not saying that's easy to do because it's not easy to let go of the fight when you're so upset. Also, if there's moral or physical things that are troublesome around your kids, you have to protect your kids, right? So you can't, but you do have to pick your battles. You do have to find a way to work through it. And everyone's going to do that a little differently. As I say all these things, I just feel led to say, if you are making mistakes and have made lots of mistakes in your separation and divorce, you are not alone, and that's normal. No, you don't know how to do this. You've never probably done it before, or if you have, the circumstances were different before. So people just have to go easy on themselves.
The thing I really liked that what you said there for people to understand is you can't change your ex. And frequently what I see saying to my clients is just that we're not going to change their behavior. We may be able to have a court see their behavior as a certain way that could change the schedule. That may cost a lot of money. That's a possibility. And sometimes the best things are self-help. And I'm not saying self-help of going to school and picking up a child on the other person's parenting time, but self-help is doing exactly what you said, which is learning how to disengage, learning the right ways to deal with your child when they're acting out. So a parent who's having the kinds of problems I illustrated, which is from various different clients I've heard over the years, but it's how you respond. And where a counselor like you can help is in giving the coaching and the abilities to know how to respond, because the more you know about that particular family, the better the advice I'm assuming you can give to that parent on how to respond as a parent when the child is acting out, when the child is being confrontational, when the child is aligned to one parent in terms of eliciting more favorable responses. And as a divorced parent, as well as a divorced lawyer, I could say those are powerful tools that you need to seriously think about getting, because it's the only way you can change the dynamic, because there's obviously something unhealthy and wrong in the dynamic. You were divorced. And now if you're going in the realm of high conflict, you're making it even worse. And there's no reason to say you're not going to get onto an off ramp to stop that for the sake of your kids. So that's something you need to do. I do see we were out of time now. I wanted to thank you, Tamika. I think it was a really interesting topic, and I appreciate your insights. So it was a pleasure having you. And the next Ask Andrew show will be on November 22nd at 12 noon. If you have any requests or ideas for future shows, please email them to us at info@feldsteinfamilylaw.com. And thank you for watching.